Mr. Guzman.
Here.
Mr. Curry.
Here.
Dr. Bruno.
Here. Mr. Lobach and Mrs. Buttimer notified the superintendent that they would not be able to be in attendance at tonight's meeting.
Mr. Guzman.
Here.
Mr.
Huh? I swear I'm not doing it. May I have a motion to allow Mr. Lobach and Mrs. Buttimer to participate by phone via Zoom for tonight's meeting?
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Moak.
Mr. Estes.
Yes.
Mrs. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Guzman.
Yes.
Mr. Curry.
Yes.
Dr. Bruno.
Yes. And one other clarification, Mrs. Buttimer will have to leave the meeting for a portion of time. Her name will appear up on the Zoom, and then she will be able to rejoin us a little later in the meeting.
Dr. Bruno, we need one more roll call.
Yes, we do. Mrs. Moak, roll call, please.
Mrs. Buttimer.
Here.
Mr. Estes.
Here.
Mrs. Hill.
Here.
Mr. Guzman.
Here.
Mr. Lobach.
Here.
Mr. Curry.
Here.
Dr. Bruno.
Here. Mr. Estes, would you please lead the board in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so first up is our superintendent's report to speak to the Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health's new guidelines, the parent survey, and some pre-decisional plans for the district. Melissa?
Sure. Mike, can you pull up the presentation, please? Okay, I'm going to try and follow along on two computers. So again, this is a pre-decisional draft that I'm sharing with the board. Want to start with some highlights in the new Isbh IDPH guidance that came out on 3/9/21. Some questions that were taken from a webinar that Mr. DePorter attended is regarding 3 feet as a standard. And so when they say, may the district establish 3 feet as a standard, no, we need to maximize distancing based on individual classroom specifics, which really means you have to get in and measure out every classroom at 3 feet.
Can we get the next slide, please? Next slide.
Oh, okay. 3 feet is an absolute minimum. According to this webinar, discretion was taken away, and this is enforced by the governor's executive order. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. 6 feet is a must while eating and as much as possible when unvaccinated staff are present. Can you mandate saliva screening? And yes, during this webinar, it was discussed, which is what similar to conversations that we've had in the past. Yes, you can mandate it as long as you have a remote option. If a district opens with less than 3 feet distance, do they lose tort immunity? We'll talk about this more, but you know what's important to know in this new guidance is that they actually use must, and that's a word that appears in this that didn't appear in some of the past guidance. Mike, you can go on to the next one. So what does this mean for us? In order to achieve 3 feet distance between all of our students, again, highlighting that the new guidelines say must, and that the standard for measuring is now edge of desk to edge of desk, or edge of person to edge of person. No longer okay to do head to head or center to center. So we have discussed what the new guidelines mean. And in order for us to accomplish this, there are a couple of things that have to happen. And some of those you have seen on the agenda. So purchasing furniture where needed. This is not an overall furniture replacement across the district, but in the rooms that we would have to replace furniture, the board will see that on the agenda being requested. If 3 feet remains a requirement for 21-22, any building modification such as moving built-in features in classrooms, we would do over the summer. For now, we will use all available space such as media centers, specials rooms, outside spaces, weather permitting. If we had to do building modifications in classrooms, that is work that would need to be done over the summer. We don't have new buildings, and we would not want to get into a situation where we had to do some level of asbestos abatement. When you pull things out in old schools, you don't know what you're going to find underneath them. So if we had to do that, we would plan that for summer. Removal of tables in classrooms. Clearly, we would be doing some disposal and donation of furniture that we take out. It's important to note that spacing solutions will vary slightly between the schools as they all have unique situations to work with and unique aspects to their building and to their classrooms as well as programming. So how would we achieve 6 feet for lunch? This would mean that half of the students would have to remain in their classroom and the other half will eat in an alternate location, whether that's in the lunchroom, to some extent out in hallways or outside. Each building may solve that a little bit differently. We're investigating the need. I know some districts have done this as part of their plan. They refer to it as picnic lunch, where you're sitting on a towel or a washable mat from home. In order to get that 6 feet, we might have to get creative and do something like that. Those big lunchroom tables are very hard to do 6 feet distancing and get many kids in there at all. And obviously we're heading into good weather days. So some of the thinking would be that kids would switch between whether you're staying in the room for lunch or alternate location. And so the alternate location kids would eat outside if it was a good weather day. Oops. Additional mitigation. Let me get this off of here. Sorry about that. HEPA units in all the rooms. We currently have 10 that were purchased for very specific spaces based on the activities going on in those spaces currently. So you see a request for 250 units that would give us 260 total, and that would put a unit in all spaces that are used for instruction. The other layer of mitigation that we've talked about in the past and need to talk about again is the status of saliva testing. Whether that is something that the board desires to see be a mandatory part of in-person attendance. What else does the guidance mean? Just some things that have to be taken into consideration when we're spacing out and measuring and setting up rooms. We need to keep in consideration that adults need to be able to walk around the room to assist kids. Some rooms have multiple adults that push into that classroom. Adults need to be able to access the smartboard and kids need to be able to see it. There needs to be enough space to allow for prompt and safe exit in case of emergency. Kids need to have access to the bookshelves, trash can, pencil sharpener, and have space for foot traffic that is necessary. They need to be able to go to the bathroom and visit the nurse. All students need to be able to access the emergency exit that are in classrooms that have one. So we cannot block these by putting desks or anything too close. We also need to continue to follow all ADA requirements. Those are not waived at this time. Students who are considered medically at risk, as documented by a physician, may need to have 6 feet distancing. Across the district, we have approximately 43 students who would fall into this category. Again, we've talked in the past about providing that 6 feet buffer for kids who need it. And we may have to do that by having a student or two more in one of the other rooms at that grade level. Mike, if you want to go on. The parent survey results. Something that I think is important to note. So I do anticipate that more will be comfortable with 3 feet when asked to make a binding decision, and we'll talk about what that means soon. But we have a total of 3601 in the district. So out of 3601, we had 1940 return a response that said, yes, they were in support of a full return to in-person this year, or 54%. We had 783 that do not support a full return to in-person, or 22%. 4%, or 173, were unsure, and 705, or 20%, did not take the survey. Things to consider when we do, if we do a binding questionnaire, we did reminders with this to people who, in Skyward, we could tell who did or did not complete the survey. We did reminders specific to those people. Again, 705 did not choose to take the survey, so we will have to, if we send a binding commitment form out, that will be something that we have to work through and very heavy duty emphasize that by calls from the school office. Some points just to bring up about the parent survey. I think we have 938 kids who are on remote right now, or families on remote right now. Out of those people who are in remote, 134 people responded saying that yes, they would support a return to full in person. Out of that 938, 397 said they did not. Again, the numbers were fairly high for unsure and did not take the survey. Of those currently in hybrid, which is 2663, 1,806 people, or 68%, said that yes, they would return, would support a full return. 386, or 14%, said no, with 123 saying they were unsure and 348 who did not take the survey. So again, the board will have access to this, so you can ask any questions when we get to that point. Just another slide, some additional information on the parent survey responses. So again, when we look at the responses as a district, we were at 54% said yes, they would support a full, a return to full, a fully reopening plan this year. 783, or 22%, no, said no. The combined unsure no response was 878, or 24%. At Lincoln, there were 319, or 59% of the people said yes. 142, or 26%, said no, and 15%, or 82, said unsure or no response. At Ben Franklin, 407, or 73%, said yes. 71, or 13%, said no. Unsure, no response was 82, or 14%. At Churchill, we had 269, or 40%, say yes. 255, or 38%, say no. And 146, or 22%, were unsure, no response. Forest Glen was 370, or 55% yes. 97, or 15% no. 200, or 30% unsure, no response. And last, Hadley, 575, or 50% said yes. 218, or 19% said no. 368, or 31% were unsure or no response. So Mike, if you want to click on the link, we can open up a pre-decisional draft planning document that we've been working on. All right. So I just want to point out in this document, it's important to note that there's many aspects of this that would need to be impact bargained with our associations. And also that the board, following public comment, will have the opportunity to go into closed session so we can discuss questions related to potential impact bargaining and issues such as that. So as we work through this, I'm going to highlight some key points in here. But again, a full in-person, this only applies for April through May of this year. We will not be holding people accountable for their selection next year. We would start the process again if this is the direction that we go in. But all students who opt for in-person learning will attend 5 days a week. The hours, you will notice, reflect a pre-COVID attendance day. Specials as close to typical as possible. We are still working through what that would look like. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Outspace will be used when appropriate and based on weather conditions. Again, there may be some variation between schools as needed to maintain any special programming offered at that school. Principals are currently working with Dr. McCluskey to figure out how to solve specials. One of the challenges in the specials schedule is that at a grade level, however many sections we have, some of those sections are, we use the word sprinkled across another class to go to specials. And doing it that way means it's too many bodies to physically put in one space for that special time. So that is one of the things that they are currently working through. So details or information that would have to come later. Results of a binding questionnaire to parents to select in-person or full remote. Teacher assignments, that information would be provided directly to parents and not to the board. And after meeting with the board, we would need to bring back a target date to the 3/22 meeting. I can share a little bit and ask Katie to do so as well, about the work that actually has to happen within Skyward. Something to keep in mind, that work is typically done over a 5-month time period, and we can't cut off this year's schedule to build a completely new schedule in Skyward. So we're trying to identify any other districts in DuPage, or I even reached out to North Shore to see if there are any districts that are Skyward student users who would be doing the same thing to figure out how they're going to tackle that remaining. We would have to keep kids to a certain date in this year's Skyward schedule and then make that change. So we just can't wipe it out. We have to start building. And till it's built, principals can't even begin scheduling students. That's an issue not only at elementary, but it's a huge issue at Hadley. So we are working on some resolutions for that. I want to go to full remote before I moved on to the next item within this to discuss. But the remote day will mirror the in-person day. Specifics as to how this will work will be shared by building principals as there are slight differences between the schools. Details and information about remote that will come later would be class size numbers for remote, teacher assignments. Again, that target date is something that we would have to bring back. In addition, within the area of, just the school day, we will need to purchase additional curricular materials. And another thing that we are currently pricing out is specialized instrument covers that would need to be purchased. We have requested some quotes for those things. Again, I think it's important to note that the curriculum for this year was scope and sequenced around AM, PM. So that requires basically a full rewrite from the curriculum department and coaches and Katie to really take lessons from the length of time that they are now to what they would be. And also doubling the number of students at any one time changes materials that are needed. So those are things that are already being discussed. Lunch recess. So again, this day would include lunch and recess. The Isbh guidance does say that kids must be 6 feet social distance while eating. Again, half the students would remain in the room and alternating desks to give them that space. The other half would eat in another location. On good days, we can certainly use outside. Again, this means using kind of a picnic lunch approach. I know some districts around us are having kids bring a big towel from home and then they take it home once a week and wash it, or a washable mat. And if that is where we land on how to make this work, we would certainly, let parents know in the information that gets sent home. One of the really important things about this is we will need parent volunteers to commit to providing supervision for this. Even with posting, it's going to take time to find that many bodies. if we are able to find that many bodies to work for a 2-hour period of time. So lunch is going to take assistance. You know, I don't want to ask the principals to weigh in on that, but having half the kids in alternate locations and having kids in that classroom, there's just no way around, no matter how we tried to make this work. We need extra hands to pull lunch and recess off. Transportation, as per the IDPH and Isbh guidance, we can have 49 students plus a driver on the bus. First Student does not have any additional buses to add to our routes. You know, this is not a change. We've always asked any parents who could provide transportation during this time to do so. You know, that will continue because again, we have to cap those bus routes at 49 kids. Again, we'll keep ventilation in place. Masks will still be required on the bus. You know, but we are capped at 49 kids. After school activities, I put TBD. We know we've started some things at Hadley. If this is the direction that we go, we won't be taking any more after school stuff on until we navigate this. Field trips would remain, you know, not appropriate for this year. Mitigation measures, as I said, in addition to the 3 feet social distancing, universal masking would be required. Double masking can be another layer of mitigation if needed, based on student need for something more. HEPA filter units, hand hygiene will continue, and nightly cleaning. We will not be getting into those classroom spaces midday as we do now, so that sanitizing will have to happen nightly. Something that we can talk about in rare exception, and we would bring this information back to the board after we have the binding responses from parents, and we can go through and say, these are the number of students we have in person. This is how it breaks out in this grade level at this building. If we have any spaces that are shy of 3 feet, we would need to discuss additional mitigation measures. Our goal will be to not have that be the case, but in case, if it was, and I know council can talk more about this, things such as double masking, plexiglass on the desktop, those plexiglass barriers, additional PPE, and use of outdoor space when possible. Again, as mentioned before, in order to achieve 3 feet, the board is being asked to approve a furniture purchase and the HEPA units for all classrooms. Currently, the district has 8. I want to correct that, that's 10. We currently have 10 and we're requesting 250 additional units. And we can talk about that in detail if you want when we get to that. I know, Ted, I believe you had a question about, is there significant maintenance or cost involved with the maintaining those? And the maintenance answer is no. And the filters, you know, when, Dave, do you by any chance have an idea of what filter replacement is like on those units?
Yeah, they're about $88 a piece.
Okay. Do they give us an hour, you know, like, you know, how many hours they're typically in use before you have to replace, or do we just have to monitor them?
We'll just monitor them. They clean up pretty easy with just a vacuum, so we'll do that with our regular filter maintenance and the unit ventilators.
Okay. All right. Plan in case adaptive pause is needed. This would be an all district or all school adaptive pause. Students would maintain their same teachers who will provide daily instruction using the Chromebook and Google Classroom. Plan in case a student needs remote instruction due to a required quarantine. We would maintain that as it is currently. That would be a conversation between the building principal and the parent as to whether the parent wanted the child to get the missed work from the teacher or move into remote for that time period. I put TBD on there in case there's anything as we continue down this path, if there's anything else that we need to bring back and share. In the event, so emergency weather days, in the event that school cannot open due to weather, the district will employ a remote learning day. I think it's safe to say that we're hoping that snow days are not something that we have to contend with for this year. But after today, who knows? Students with IEPs and 504 plans, they will receive all their supports and services as per the IEP. And students who remain on full remote will receive all their supports and services as per the IRLP. I don't want, not ISP, that's service plan. IRLP as is currently in place. Additional staffing needs for all of this. Clearly, additional lunch recess supervisors and/or volunteers. Additional help with Skyward. As of today, we are looking for anyone around us who might be able to lend us some of their Skyward trained people. District 87 had offered to do so, and then we found out that they don't use it for their student information system. So take that one off. But again, I have reached out to the other DuPage districts and have a call into North Shore districts to see if we can find another district that uses this and is in our situation. COVID testing, if weekly testing will be required, we really need that decision as soon as possible so that we can scale up our testing program. Right now, we have 2 very part-time people who come in and help get all of those envelopes prepared and ready to send home. We will need to obviously make a purchase because we would be doubling potentially the amount of participation. So that is something that we have to plan for. I did speak with Safeguard and they could, they have the capability to scale up and process more samples for us. It's just a matter of how we want to handle it internally. So if we were going to move forward with this, these are the things that after our team has been meeting most of last week through the weekend and today, these are the things that are most time sensitive. Furniture, obviously that's on the agenda for tonight. The HEPA unit purchase is on the agenda for tonight. Again, we're actively seeking additional support for Skyward Student Information System. I think that's, just very important to know that it falls mainly on one person's shoulders in our district. And that work is typically done over several months. So we are really looking at how to bring in some additional support to try and make this happen in some kind of a realistic timeline. Buildings cannot even begin their scheduling process until their schedules are built in Skyward. Mr. DePorter needs the ability to begin, requesting transportation changes with Hopewell. Dr. McCluskey needs the ability to order necessary curriculum materials. Again, we're also currently investigating quotes for specialized band instrument covers. Skyward, I don't want to talk too much about Skyward, but this entire Skyward model needs to be rebuilt. We need that binding parent selection ASAP. Mr. Scarmato will schedule the work needed to move and reconfigure classrooms and instructional spaces, including the lunchroom. Again, we will hold off on removing any built-in features in classrooms until summer, just in case it becomes a larger asbestos issue that we need to take into consideration and plan for. We can use this time to find optimal uses of space so that any adjustments can be made over the summer for next school year. Mr. DePorter will arrange for disposal of the furniture that is being removed and look to donate whenever possible. Mrs. Conlon needs the ability to post and fill any positions and work directly with any staff members who will be needed to return from an approved accommodation. Dr. McCluskey needs to plan out the process for revising the instructional scope and sequence for the remainder of the year. We need direction from the board regarding saliva testing. Will it stay as voluntary or will it be required? Medical plans will need to be updated for any student who requires mitigation planning. This will be done through the building nurses with assistance from our district certified nurses and Katie Aducci. Again, just really emphasizing that we are going to need hands to help us pull lunch and recess off. When those postings are done, if we are able to fill, then obviously the volunteer issue is short term, but we really can't say right now how hard or easy it will be to find people willing to work 2 hours a day. Sometimes those are not so easy to fill. So I'm going to ask Mike to go back into the PowerPoint, Mike. Okay. So one of the other housekeeping items that I wanted to mention is the school perception survey. I'm going to recommend that we hold off on the survey and use it towards the end of the school year to get input for changes that we may need or want to make for the next school year. If we're purchasing furniture and considering making building modifications over the summer, then the larger solutions such as portables and a facility are no longer something that we need to input on. If the guidance stays at 3 feet for next year, we can make any improvements over the summer for next year. If the guidance, if the social distancing requirement goes away entirely, then we're golden for next year. So we wouldn't need to use the survey right now for that kind of input. So that is what I have.
Hey, Mike, can I get into Zoom? I don't think
Yeah, Mike, you can get out of that. Thank you, Melissa. Board members, what I'd like to do is like to hold off on any questions and discussions at this point, allow the board to hear from the community, and then give the board the opportunity to go into closed session for a bit, and then come out of closed session. That would be an opportunity then to ask some additional questions and to look for some consensus. I think we're going to be far better informed if we do that. So we want to turn to our public comment. Members of the public who wish to make public comment virtually during the live stream Board of Education were invited to complete and submit a form earlier today. The 3 individuals will be admitted to the meeting via Zoom by Director of Technology Mike Wood. Speakers will have 3 minutes for public comment, which must adhere to Board Policy 2:230, public participation at school board meetings and petitions to the board. Members of the public are also able to address the board in person. Those individuals should check in with Mrs. Moak, the board recording secretary. Speakers are asked to maintain respectful decorum and limit comments to 3 minutes or less. Any comments not completed can be forwarded to Mrs. Moak and will be attached to the approved minutes. And I will, of course, at around 30 seconds, remind the speaker to wrap up their comments, both on Zoom or in person. So, Mrs. Moak, who do we have first up in the Zoom, please?
Susan Angelopoulos.
I see somebody connecting. And she's moving. We'll give, I'm assuming this is Susan. Susan, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you are free to begin your public comment. In around 30 seconds, I'll just encourage you to prepare to wrap up, all right? Are you good?
I can't hear anyone.
You can't hear. Susan, can you hear me?
I can. I
You cannot? I'm sorry.
can't see anything.
Do we want to let you, maybe we can go to a second?
I'll listen in. I mean, that's fine.
Well, Susan, this is an opportunity for you to make public comment. If you can do it, we can let you do that. Otherwise, you might want to sign out. We can go to somebody else and maybe try it one more time. We'll put you at the end of the queue. Would that work for you?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay.
Aaron Dieter.
Here we go.
Hi,
Hey, Aaron, are you ready to go?
I am.
Okay,
All right. Thanks.
you're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Erin Dieter, and although I no longer have children in District 41 schools, I still live in Glen Ellyn and still care very much about my neighbors and friends whose children do attend District 41 schools. I'm here tonight after watching many board meetings and hearing numerous parents pleading with the board to prioritize the academic and social emotional needs of their students. It has been shocking and saddening to hear that this board has done so little to attempt to offer full day in-person instruction. When my children were at Lincoln, there was much energy around the benefits of having a growth mindset. Yet this board has set an extremely poor example as leaders of this growth mindset. I have yet to hear an actual discussion about creative ways to attempt to bring all students that have a desire to return to full-time in-person schooling back to school. And yet I can think of many potential solutions. For example, utilizing lunchrooms, libraries, and gyms as classrooms, having students eat lunch in their classrooms, in decent weather, having tents so classrooms and lunch can be outside, partnering with the Glen Ellyn Park District to have classes in all or some of their 3 facilities, utilizing large hallways or specials rooms for core instruction in math and literacy. I understand the space constraints that our schools have. I was a part of the facilities task force in 2016, and my kids attended Lincoln back when there were portables. Yet even with certain challenges, there has been very little discussion of ways to make potential space shifts happen. How often has this board reached out to parents with ideas of ways to try to make this work? I understand parents prefer to have all of their elementary age kids in the same building, but have you even offered ideas of utilizing spaces differently or trying to have certain grades attend a different building for all-day instruction? But the most compelling reason that I decided to take the time to speak tonight was because I heard a parent share recently during a prior board meeting that her 3rd through 5th grade child has only had 22 in-person days of math instruction this year. I was speechless. My 5th grader has had over 100 days of in-person math instruction. I have to question if teachers' specialization is a driving force behind this large discrepancy. If 3rd through 5th grade teachers were not specialized, even with half-day in-person learning, wouldn't those students have math and literacy instruction daily?
30 seconds,
And wouldn't
please.
those classes wouldn't those be for shorter time blocks? And isn't that what research has proven to be most beneficial for children in elementary school? Shorter learning blocks with much repetition. I know this is probably not a popular topic to bring up amongst the 3rd through 5th grade teachers, but they are all qualified to teach both math and literacy content. And shouldn't the Board of Education be placing the academic and social emotional needs of our students as a priority of everything they're doing? Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And Mrs. Moak, I see a second person maybe
Kim
signing on.
Grotto.
I'm sorry.
Howard.
Who was it again? Say again, please.
Kim Grotto Howard.
Okay, looks like connecting to audio, so. And it looks like Sue, well, we'll see whether Kim gets there. Oh, no, I didn't know that. Thank you
happened
for
there?
pointing that out. I can see. Yeah, I guess you're not really seeing it, if you're right. All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Well, Kim's still trying to get on. Susan, let's let Kim still try. Susan, can you unmute and you think you can give, whoops, Kim's ready. All right, good. Well, Kim, are you there? You ready to go?
Here.
Into audio. so-
Okay, at about 30 seconds, I'll remind you to about wrap it up, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you wait one before you start me? Hold on. I got to turn off the meeting I was listening to. Sorry. Okay. Hi, my name is Kim Grotto Howard. I come to the Board of Education tonight as a D41 parent and your constituent, asking you, challenging you to be sure you are asking and solving the right questions. COVID phase 1 asked a very clear question. In the face of limited data information, how do we keep kids, teachers, and staff safe from possible death? You did a good job in the face of difficult and heavy circumstances and made hard choices to keep our schools safe. Unfortunately, in retrospect, I think we may also come to see that phase 1 was the easy part. Now, as we enter phase 2, what does the future look like as we negotiate living with COVID? As it relates to school, the semantics have us debating logistics, full day or part day, mandatory testing or voluntary, and on and on. In the process, our community is caught in a fraught, emotional, and divisive conversation, one that goes in circles and gets more contentious by the day. But we would all do well to understand that mitigation and logistics are not our core issues. Instead, we are negotiating what are the top priorities of our schools? What are the risks we are willing to take as a community? What are the trade-offs we are willing to make? Since everyone will have different answers to these questions, how do we go about finding consensus? Best practice says we need a moderator and a facilitator, and we should have one, you, the school board. But frankly, I don't think you've stepped up for or into this role. According to the Illinois Association of School Boards, of which D41 is a member, the number 2 foundational principle of effective governance is the board connects with the community. Under this, IASB states, in order to solve problems, make choices, and act for the public good, public leaders need to do more than talk among themselves. They need to reach out to discern communities' aspirations on issues, which involves 3 tasks. Create a shared understanding of policy problems and choices. Without it, you're more likely to do harm the public good than do good. Craft policy solutions that achieve the greatest possible public good, and importantly, use democratic means to accomplish the first 2 tasks. These include inclusion, participation, representation, deliberation, and facilitation. In this moment, we are solving community problems and negotiating the future of our schools. That includes policies on safety, academics, social, emotional support, and more. To set these policies is the board's primary function, and it's critical you involve your constituents in this process. For months, I have listened to the board discuss your moral imperatives. Let me remind you and let me be clear, as the elected conduit between the community and the administration, it is actually your duty to engage the community in order to determine what we want and are willing to support, establish the district goals that reflect those values, find the resources to deliver on the promises articulated in those goals.
30 seconds, Kim.
To do that, even if, and especially if the answers go against your personal feelings and your personal morals, you must attach. Equally important, I would like to remind our district community that it is our duty to offer honest, direct information to help the board make decisions. Understand the board makes those decisions based on what is best for the district as a whole, and respect and support decisions after the board weighs all the information gathered. We are past the point of unilateral decisions in this crisis. If you, the board, do not lead a 2-way conversation and hear what your constituents are telling you, you risk failing at representation and a failure to build consensus and support for your policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Susan. Is Susan, can you unmute your mic and take another shot at it? Susan, you're still there? Can you hear me? No? I think Susan is having technical difficulties. Okay, we're gonna then move on to the, apologies to Susan. We will move on to in-person public comment. Oh, Susan, you're back. Can you unmute you? No, she's gone again. I'm sorry. Sorry, Susan. Mrs. Boak, is there anyone who would like to make public comment, please?
Tiffany Ruddle.
Tiffany, thank you.
I'm here tonight to express my deep concern that the desires of the loud have trumped the needs of the vulnerable. We are in the middle of a heated election in a divided nation at what is hopefully the tail end of an unprecedented global crisis. We're tired and grasping for any sense of positivity or normalcy. That's human. It's the desperation of sustained crisis mode, and it's also being a parent. I've heard the term vulnerable used quite a lot lately by all sorts of people. That catch-all term seems to act as a basket for any number of demographics. Children with special needs, like my son. Children and families with medical vulnerabilities, like 2 of my closest friends. Kids who are food, home, or healthcare insecure. Ones from non-English speaking households. Families who, as hard as it may be to hear, many of us in Glen Ellyn don't see or think about with any regularity. Far too often and in far too many places, the vulnerable get used as the reasoning behind what less vulnerable people think needs to happen. I wonder if we asked those vulnerable people what they need, what would they say? And what would we say if their answer wasn't what we wanted to hear? For months, I have been advocating alongside other parents of children who receive services for more in-person time with their therapists and resource teachers. I have been told over and over that, sorry, things are just too rigid right now. We can't eat into that 11-to-1 time slot because X, Y, and Z. I cried after watching my son's IEP get the line item veto treatment. take out speech, take out OT, take out social work, cut the minutes in half because he's in school, he's in school half the time. Luckily for my family, where we started isn't where we've ended up. We have an amazing team, and I have the resources and information and time to advocate for him and troubleshoot. I'm lucky, and in that way, I'm not particularly vulnerable. I'm certain I was not the only one hearing those no's for months. Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm certain not everyone figured out a decent solution in the way that we did, or that based on true need, a solution within the unbendable framework was even possible. So imagine my surprise, anger, my disgust when we as a district are able to move heaven and earth to order hundreds of thousands of dollars of new furniture, to rip our classrooms apart, to turn an entire year on its ear for a few weeks of full day learning that no data even shows provides additional academic benefit. Isbh cracked a window, outraged community members smashed the glass, and now you as the board are deciding your next move. I'm not anti-change, I'm anti-foolhardy change. We talk about prioritizing the vulnerable, so let's do that. Let's look at the information we have at our disposal. Who has IEPs? Who is in the at-risk category? Who has documented learning loss beyond the expected norm? Who has urgent mental health requirements beyond the grief and fatigue we all feel? We have an entire infrastructure at our disposal to identify those children and lift them up with love, support, and services. Opening the floodgates to everyone doesn't help the so-called vulnerable. At best, it loses them in the shuffle. At worst, it cuts them out entirely. Board members, as you make your decisions, please remember you are the custodians of nearly 4,000 children. And neighbors, please consider that there are people in this community facing hardship that is unfathomable to many of us. All pain is real pain. But can we live with ourselves if we get a temporary lift on the backs of people who are, in fact, the vulnerable we all invoke so frequently? Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Sorry I ran over.
All right, thank you.
Justin Gaglia.
I feel like this podium has become my home away from home and truly my third full-time job. Sad that I'm working this hard to advocate to give my children and the children in this community what they deserve, and that's a public education, something that you're so willing to rob them of, hold over their heads while you keep moving the goalpost of what's going to get them back in full-time. Instead of playing with our children like they are lab rats and invoking fear on the community with now the variants of COVID, how about we focus on and celebrate that as of today, Illinois has a positivity rate of 2.9%, or that there are more people fully vaccinated in Illinois. I repeat, there were more people vaccinated than there ever were positive of COVID here in Illinois. This is a huge accomplishment for a state that was rated one of the worst vaccine rollouts in the nation. And we have already reached this milestone. And yet here you sit, keeping our children prisoners. You are just now beginning to bring to the forefront the basic needs to get our kids back into school, such as desks and air purifiers. I knew that we were behind, but I did not think that we were at ground zero. These are action items that should have been discussed months ago. However, your lack of initiative could cost us more than just money, but possibly our children from returning back full-time this year. Your lack of forward planning has just been dismal. One would think that you would have learned your lesson with the Chromebooks and your lack of planning just this summer. You already tried to paint a false narrative last summer when you stated that there were no portables available, even if you wanted them. I discredited that in a personal meeting when I called 2 different vendors and they had them ready to be delivered. And your next excuse was that you didn't even have anywhere to put them on any school property. Now, all of a sudden, a year later, you're willing to move mountains to get portables, but you don't even know how many because you haven't even surveyed the parents other than this recent survey. You went from 121 to 150 portables at the end of February to our last meeting of 18. Big difference. You're acting like it's day 1 of the virus. We're on day 365.
30 seconds, Jess.
We were told by our then president, don't let the cure become bigger than the problem. And you've done just that. You've let the cure outweigh science, parents' voices, children's test scores, children's needs, and surrounding districts' perseverance to normalize. This board does not have our kids' best interest at heart, And that's proven each month with the one-sided voting that happens. This isn't a democracy being run. However, it's time for change and for us to demand our children deserve full-time education because the science proves it.
Thank you, Jess. Mrs. Moak, anyone else?
Chris Jackson.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Bruno, Mr. Curry, and members of the D41 board. My name is Chris Jackson, and I'm a proud parent of a Abe Lincoln student, Celeste, who's a first grader. Last fall, I put out a survey to the community asking for feedback to give the board some insights and to help create a dialogue. All of those contents were given to the board. I sincerely hope the dialogue would continue. Since then, I have seen the myopic approaches deployed, and it has become very apparent to me. This system is stacked against the administrators, the teachers, the parents, and even most concerning, our children, including my daughter. As I stated in the August board meeting, I said, D41 board, you have a problem. What I have come to learn is that the community has a problem with this board. By the board's own statistics, our first and second graders are losing 125 minutes a week for literacy and 100 minutes a week for math. Effectively, our first and second graders, including my daughter, have lost 6 full weeks of education. On February 12th, the CDC released guidance for operating schools. According to the CDC, K through 12 schools should be the last to close and the first to reopen when they can do so safely. Data from the same study showed no risk difference between in-person versus remote, especially for children under 10. Yet at this last meeting, the board was not in favor of asking parents if children should return to full-time. This is unacceptable when these children have been robbed of their education. Just today on the agenda, we're now starting to talk about the basics, desk and filtration. Aside from the CDC, joint guidance from the IDPH and ISBE also supports return to in-person instruction. In addition, the IDPH guideline for social distance was reduced to 3 feet from 6 feet for students and fully vaccinated staff. Why did the district publish a survey to gauge parents' interests, citing 1.5 foot spacing when that went against every published guideline? No parent, including myself, wants a disregard for safety. Was your survey worded purposely to defer interest in returning to in-person education? Dr. Dworkin's CV does not list any experience in K through 12. He does not even cite the before mentioned guidelines. The roadmap to return already exists, and this board lacks common sense to use to find a solution. I want to tell this community this board is totally complacent with substandard education.
30 seconds.
And we are not even meeting the bare minimum requirements to educate your child. Do not let this current board tell you what's best for the district when they have demonstrated one-sided thinking with a lack of transparency. We as parents are responsible for our children's education. Continue to be involved in your child's education and make sure to always remember education is the key to inclusion and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Ryan Osterholm.
Good evening. I just want to say thank you, Dr. K, for presenting a plan that moves us ahead this year. Thank you, really. I mean, from the bottom of my heart. No doubt there have been some missteps in my mind, and we're behind the curve here. And consequently, I know there's a ton of work ahead over a pretty short period to operationalize this plan. But this is a task that will pay enormous dividends, and it is worth it. This last year has been difficult for everyone, and I can't think of a more rewarding way to finish off this school year than to bring back kids for a full day. The thought of kids at recess, imagining my daughter being in class and getting her specialized services in person, those things, give me a really warm feeling and hope. And so thank you for that. I urge the board to do everything in its power to give Dr. K and her team and all our educators in D41 everything they need to make this plan a reality. If there was ever time for a blank check, it's now. So I just urge you guys to support her and her team and get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Christina Lindell.
Hi, my name is Christina Lindell. I'm a parent of 2 children in D41. Last week I spoke and I had a bunch of stuff written down. This week I'm just kind of going to speak off the cuff. First of all, I echo Mr. Osterholm's comments. I am appreciative of the plan that is in place. I'm disappointed that we are kind of behind the curve in terms of having some of the tools that we need in such a short period of time to get to where we need to be in order to open up. That being said, listen, I have been in this room for the last 4 years. This is not new, where we don't agree as a community with the boards that are in place. I have helped elect the board that is sitting in front of me. I do believe in you. I have told people in the past, have faith. They have our kids' best interests in heart. This is the time that we need to show that. This is the time as a community, we need to come together and do everything we can to support our schools and our district if we are going to move forward with this plan. I implore everybody in this room to sign up if able to be a volunteer like Dr. K asked. I, for one, will do anything our school needs. Anybody who knows me knows I'm at the school, or was pre-COVID, almost as much as the teachers, because I'm available, because I'm fortunate. And I know that there's lots of families who aren't in our community and they can't do it, so we need to do it for them. Just a couple of things. Where was I at? Sorry, I hate public speaking. This is why I normally write everything down.
You're doing fine.
Couple of questions is I would ask back on the survey, or the PowerPoint, as I was looking at all the numbers. I think it's important, as Dr. K said, we have to find a way to get to the people who know responses. I know Forest Glen, Churchill probably have a community that aren't on their computers and aren't on their phones and don't have as much access to fill out things in Skyward. And I think that that will be a much better representation of where people land. I'm willing to make phone calls. Maybe there's a way we can start a phone chain, anything we can do to reach out to those peoples in that community that don't have access to the internet as much. And then a couple of things that I talked about last week. I think that you do want community input.
30 seconds.
I think we need to be more transparent on that and how we're achieving it. There are so many resources in our community. As a wife of a healthcare worker, I live around the corner from 2 intensivists, my husband, anesthesiologist. There's so much information on how to mitigate risk. I wish you would reach out more. If there's a sign up, please let me know where it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Liz Semple? I spoke also last week at the board meeting, and I'm just so pleased to see tonight the plan. This is what I was hoping for, and I think you guys did a great job. And I just want to thank you for moving the district forward. As I said in my presentation last week, I told my kids to have faith. District 41 has always been great. I have 3 kids now, 1 at Glenbard West. We've been pleased with everything that has happened here, and I know that you guys can do this. I know you can get these kids back in school and do it safely and what's best for kids. So thank you, board, Dr. K. I'm in full support of any help you need. I'd be happy to do it. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Liz.
Krista Sawa?
Good evening. My name is Krista Soa, and I have a 2nd grader at Churchill, and I have a 7th grader here at Hadley. I came here tonight to express my gratitude to the board, Dr. K, and all the staff and teachers of D41. This has not been an easy year for anyone. 1 year ago, a pandemic hit, a first of our lifetime. You were all forced to make decisions no one had made before, and yet you did it with extreme determination, focus, and foremost of all, the mission to keep our students and families safe. You have managed to give students a reliable, safe, and consistent schedule for the past year. My children are thriving, and I don't want to see that lost by shoving them into a new routine, perhaps new teachers, for the last 7 weeks of core education with a much higher chance of quarantine. What about our special learners? How will this change in routine affect them? As a bonus mom to an autistic son, any change in an established routine can be detrimental for them for weeks until they adjust. Has this been taken into account? This is a letter that I've been asked to read this evening. Dear Dr. K and board, Thank you for all the work you and the board do to serve our students well. My family is new to the district this year. We moved to Glen Ellyn from the Bay Area in August. A big factor in our decision to move here was the thoughtful way you and the board were grappling and working through planning for the school year. My older sister has had students in D41 for a few years. In July, while I was visiting from California, one of the summer virtual board meetings was playing as we were making dinner. Listening to the thoughtful, creative way the hybrid model was designed and how the board was handling planning decisions made me want to have my child be part of this community. Throughout the school year, I have continued to be impressed with the quality of education my child has been receiving. The choice to have smaller class sizes helps my daughter feel known and part of the class. Having specials in larger groups gives her the sense of that larger Churchill community. Even though the class sizes are bigger, the teachers still take time to check in with students. The digital media course has taught my daughter to use technology effectively and understand what it means to be a good digital citizen. Having experienced another district's response to this pandemic, I know how lucky Glen Ellyn is to have experienced, practical, and caring leadership. With appreciation, parent of a second grade student. I ask the board to consider all our learners when you make the decision to return to full-time for such a short time. We need some parents to put aside their own selfish need to get back to their social lives and realize that the best thing for our students is to end the year with a structure, routine, and peace of mind that their will not be flipped upside down again for the remainder of the year. We need our board to focus on a plan that gets us back in the fall, which I'm confident they will achieve in a manner that will continue to keep all of our students and families safe. Thank you for choosing our students first.
Thank you.
That's all.
Okay. Yes, absolutely, Melissa, please do.
Not that it's typical, but I'm going to do this again just because I think I like to answer questions when I have the opportunity to do so. Just want to share in terms of ordering, HEPA units are not needed. This is something that we're asking the board to do. So it's not part of what it takes to get us back in. So I just would like to share that that's not keeping us out, nor are we behind on ordering them. Many places have not put them in at all. Furniture, again, we're not behind on ordering furniture. Furniture would not have solved the 6-foot issue. Last Tuesday, 3 feet became the issue. And so we've been looking at how to make this work since then, but furniture would not have solved a 6-foot issue. And we've talked about that time and time again. The survey question, I'm just going to put it out there. I wrote it quickly, no slant, no ill intent. I asked a question based on 1.5 feet because we needed to get a question out there to get a sense of what parents were thinking and feeling at that point in time. And that was the only concrete number that I could say based on what we know today. If all of our kids were to come back, it would not be less than 1.5 feet. So would we expect the numbers to change if we can now say that it's 3 feet? Absolutely. But again, sometimes you have to go with the number that you have in front of you and get a question out. So again, I wrote it. Please don't be upset at the board. If you want to be upset at me, you know, you can do so. But again, no ill intent to sway the survey. It was 2 quick questions and really just to get a sense of what people were feeling. So just wanted to share those.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, now the board does have a need to adjourn to closed session at this time. May I have a motion to adjourn to a closed session to confidentially discuss section 2C1, the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee to determine its validity. Section 2C2, collective negotiating matters between the school board and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for 1 or more classes of employees. And section 2C8, emergency security procedures and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to actual danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, or public property, provided that a description of the actual danger shall be made a part of the motion to close the meeting as presented. I need a motion, board.
I so move.
Any discussion? Mrs. Moak, roll call, please.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Mrs. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Estes?
Yes.
Mr. Lobach?
Mr. Lobach?
Yes, sorry. I gave a thumbs up too.
Mr. Guzman?
Yes.
Mrs. Buttimer?
Yes.
Dr. Bruno?
Yes. the board will, of course, return to open session